I've been in this line of work for over 30 years. You learn quickly in this business how to read silence, the stillness in a chapel when only the dead are present. You come to respect it, sometimes fear it, but you never ignore it. There's a certain kind of quiet that blankets a funeral home after midnight. It's not just the absence of noise, it's a weight, a presence, like the building itself is holding its breath. We don't often talk about it among staff, not out of superstition, but out of respect. We handle death with care, and we know better than to poke at things that don't ask for our attention. Still, some things, they demand to be noticed. It started about 6 months ago. Our night staff began reporting oddities during their shift walkthroughs. Doors that were closed were found open. Lights in the viewing rooms would flicker on, not all at once, but one by one. Never enough to raise a panic, just enough to make you pause. And then there was the footage. We have security cameras, of course. It's standard, not just for security, but for liability. You'd be surprised what people do when they think no one is watching. But this was different. One of our overnight attendants, Eric, had been the first to notice. He's a quiet man, ex-military, reliable, not the type to spook easily. One morning, he came to me pale, asking if I could take a look at the recordings myself. I did. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. The chapel was dimly lit, as it always is, a soft glow above the casket, a respect for the recently departed. In the middle of the room, a figure stood, dark, lean, still. The kind of still that isn't restful, the kind that feels watching. At first, I assumed it was Eric himself, maybe just checking in. But then I saw the face, or rather, the way the face was oriented. It was staring directly at the camera, not toward the casket, not walking through the aisle, not caught mid-motion, just standing there and watching. I played it again, slower. The camera's positioned in the back of the chapel near the ceiling, angled downward. To be looking directly at it, your head would have to be tilted unnaturally high, uncomfortably so. We checked the logs. No staff was logged entering the chapel at that hour. The doors never opened. The alarm didn't trip. Nothing. For a while we chalked it up to a glitch, a shadow, a trick of light, until it kept happening. Always the same hour, between 2 and 2:30 a.m., always the same figure, sometimes farther back, sometimes closer to the casket, once even right at the front, hands resting at its sides like a mourner or a sentinel, but always facing the camera, always watching. We tried to debunk it. We had a tech come out to inspect the system. He reviewed the footage, ran diagnostics on the motion sensors. His conclusion? Looks like someone's been walking through your chapel. When I asked him how someone could get in without triggering the alarms or being seen on the entrance footage, he just shrugged. Could be a system blind spot. But it isn't. I know every corner of that building. There are no blind spots. There never have been. We started noticing other things too. Personal items left in the chapel overnight. Sympathy cards, framed photographs would be slightly shifted by morning. Not missing, just moved. Tilted, angled as though someone had been studying them. One evening, I decided to stay behind. Just me, the quiet, and the chapel. I didn't go in. I sat in the small viewing room next door with the monitor on, camera feed playing live. Nothing for the first hour, nothing for the second. And then, there it was. The figure. It stepped into view from the far left, just beyond the reach of the casket's glow. It didn't walk like a person. It didn't sway or hesitate. It simply was, one moment absent, the next fully present. And true to form, it turned its head, not slowly, not theatrically, but in one crisp, unnatural movement and stared directly into the lens. I wanted to go in. I wanted to prove it was someone, anyone. But I couldn't move. My legs just wouldn't. My mouth was dry. My body had simply stopped cooperating. I watched, frozen, as the figure stood there for 6 minutes. And then it was gone. I've never seen it enter. I've never seen it leave. It just appears when the night is deep and grief is heaviest. We don't talk about it much anymore. We still run the cameras, but we don't review the chapel footage unless we have to. Some of the staff leave small offerings by the door. Flowers, candles, old rosary beads. I've seen someone leave a note once, folded and placed gently on a pew. The caskets remain undisturbed. The dead are at peace. But someone, something, still comes to watch them, not every night, but often enough to remind us not all who mourn are living. And in this line of work, you learn to accept that the silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's being returned. Hello, friends. Thank you for watching. A special shout out to our subscribers. You keep these eerie stories alive. But here's the thing, only 30% of viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, hitting subscribe helps us more than you know. It takes a second, but makes a huge difference. While you're at it, like and share to keep the chills coming. Thanks again. You made this possible. See you in the next one, if you dare. I've arranged hundreds of funerals over the years. People think my job is about death, but really, it's about the living, about listening, guiding, and doing whatever it takes to help families say goodbye. Most days are routine, at least as routine as death ever gets. But every once in a while, a family comes in and something feels different. Not loud, not supernatural, just off. That's how it was with the Harper case. Michael Harper was 22, drowned while fishing at his family's lakeside cabin. According to the report, he was alone when it happened. His mother found the overturned boat herself, still tethered to the dock by the anchor rope. They recovered his body 2 days later. The call came to us late on a Thursday. When I saw the condition he was in, I understood right away why we'd be recommending a closed casket. Water does terrible things to a body, especially after 2 nights in the cold. But then Mrs. Harper came in to make the arrangements. She walked in wearing a plain gray coat, her hands folded, expression unreadable. She sat down, stared straight ahead, and before I could even offer her condolences, she spoke. "The casket stays closed. Don't open it. Don't even ask." I assured her that would be no problem. We always honor the family's wishes. But then she added something else, something that gave me pause. "He's not really in there." I waited. She wasn't crying, wasn't shaking. Her voice wasn't even soft, just calm, almost matter-of-fact. She said that ever since the night he drowned, her son had been coming home. Not in a dream, not in a vision, physically. Every night around 3, she said, he comes through the back door. He's soaked, dripping, just like the day they pulled him out of that lake. At first I thought maybe she meant metaphorically. Grief plays tricks. People say things. But she went on. She described finding puddles, hearing footsteps, the creak of the stairs. She said she'd get up to check, thinking maybe she was losing her mind. But then she'd see him, standing in the hallway, in the shadows, clothes plastered to his body, head tilted, watching her, never speaking. "I try to clean it up," she told me. "The water, but it's never there in the morning." She wasn't emotional. She wasn't trying to convince me. She was simply telling me how things were, like she was describing the weather. And when she handed me the obituary photo, Michael, smiling with a fishing rod, bare feet in the boat, I noticed her hands were steady, not a tremble. We went ahead with the arrangements. She didn't ask for flowers, didn't want a long service, just enough for the family to gather. Closed casket, of course, not just because of the condition, but, as she insisted, because it was empty. Only a handful of people came. She sat near the back, didn't look up once, never looked toward the casket. Her eyes stayed on the doors the entire time, like she was waiting for something or someone. Afterward, as people quietly filtered out, she approached me. "I had to do this," she said, "for everyone else, to let them think he's gone." She looked up at me. Her expression was still blank, but her voice was lower now. "But I see him. I still hear the water hit the floor." We buried the casket 2 days later. She didn't stay. Watched from her car, engine running, and drove off before the last shovelful of dirt. I didn't expect to hear from her again. Then a few months later, a colleague in another town told me about a woman who'd come in for pre-arrangement. Said she wanted her own coffin bolted shut. Not just locked, bolted, reinforced. He asked why, and she just said flatly, "Because when I die, I don't want to come back wet." I've been in the funeral business for over 27 years. I've seen a lot. Grief in all its rawness, families torn by loss, people who die quietly in their sleep, and others whose lives end in sudden, violent ways. I've buried the very old and heartbreakingly young. But nothing, not even the worst of those nights, prepared me for what happened with Mr. Lawson's body. Gregory Lawson, middle-aged, 53 years old, divorced, worked construction for most of his life. The kind of man who looked like he'd been through more than his share of hard days. Weathered skin, broad shoulders, strong hands. He died in what the police report described as a violent altercation. No further detail was given, but we saw the bruising and deep tissue trauma as we prepared him. He was delivered to our funeral home just before midnight on a Tuesday. That was the first oddity. Most transport services prefer daylight drop-offs unless there's pressure from the family, which there wasn't. He had only one relative, his daughter, Erin. She came by once, briefly, signed the papers, chose a closed casket service, and didn't linger. When we finished embalming Mr. Lawson, my assistant Sam and I placed him in one of our older but well-kept caskets. Dark oak, brass accents, sturdy latch, 3-pin lock, no reason to expect anything unusual. We closed the lid and wheeled the coffin into the chapel, which doubles as our holding area for next-day services. The following morning, I walked in early, habit of mine, before the sun, and the lid was open. Not all the way, mind you. Just a slow, clean separation, like someone had carefully unlatched it and raised it. Not forced, not broken, open. I thought maybe Sam had forgotten to lock it properly after the final prep. It happens, rarely. I closed it again myself. Took extra care, heard the pins click, I even gave it a firm push. Solid, locked, done. That night I left the chapel early. Sam stayed a little longer, cleaning up. He swore later that he checked the casket one last time before leaving. Still locked, still sealed. But on Thursday morning I arrived to find the lid up again, just as cleanly. No tool marks, no damage. Still, we checked. Mechanisms were in working order, no warping, no signs of expansion or pressure. We closed it again. Locked it. I placed a small wooden wedge beneath the lid, a little trick we use sometimes if the seal isn't taking. Friday, third morning, same thing, except this time the wedge had been removed, set neatly on the floor beside the coffin, and on the lid a faint fingerprint, bruised into the polish like the press of skin from beneath. I called Sam, asked if he came back during the night. He said no. I believed him. He's been with me 10 years. Steady hands. No reason to lie. We didn't mention it to Erin. She was scheduled to come in that evening for a private viewing before the burial. She didn't need to know anything that would distress her further. Still, something didn't sit right. So that night, I stayed behind. I kept the lights low, sat in the back pew. No music, no distractions. Just me and the cold creak of the building as it settled into night. Time passed slowly. My coffee went cold. Around midnight, I began to drift a bit, head nodding forward. Then, a sound, very faint. Tap, tap, I froze. It wasn't the creak of wood settling, it wasn't a mouse in the wall. It was deliberate, a pattern, like fingers, fingernails. I stood very slowly and took a few steps toward the coffin. Tap, 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 now unmistakable, from inside the lid, from inside the coffin. I wanted to believe I was hearing things, that fatigue was playing tricks on me, but my heart was steady, my hands weren't shaking. I reached the casket, placed my palm against the lid. It was cold, colder than it should have been, colder than the ambient air, then silence. I didn't open it. I should be clear about that. I'm a funeral director, not a fool. Whatever was or wasn't inside, I didn't need to see it again. I walked out, locked the chapel, slept in my office that night with the door closed and lights on. The next morning, I brought in an outside technician to inspect the coffin. He found nothing wrong, said it was one of the best sealed caskets he'd worked with, that there was no reason for it to keep coming open. He even joked that maybe the deceased was trying to send a message. I didn't laugh. We buried Mr. Lawson that afternoon. Erin came, stood silent through the entire graveside ceremony, then left without a word. She never reached out afterward, never called to ask about the service, never visited his plot. But here's the part I never told anyone, until now. A week after the burial, I received an anonymous envelope in the funeral home's mailbox. No return address, no note, just a single photograph. It was a picture of Mr. Lawson, taken from the side, black and white, grainy. He was seated, possibly at a police station or hospital. His hands were cuffed, his knuckles raw. In the background, barely visible, was a young woman, her face bruised, her eyes hollow. It was Erin. No words on the back, no explanation. I still have that photo, locked in my desk drawer. There's nothing supernatural about what happened, but something wasn't right. That man didn't die peacefully, and he didn't rest peacefully either. Some people carry things to their grave, and some take it further. In my line of work, peace is something we're always looking to offer, to the families, to the room, and yes, to the dead. We aim for quiet transitions, tidy goodbyes, but every so often, a case comes along that won't stay quiet, one that lingers, one that doesn't rest. Her name was Margaret Elsie, 81 years old, widowed, no children, lived alone in a modest house near the edge of town. Neighbors said she kept to herself, polite, soft-spoken, the kind who watered her plants like clockwork and never missed her evening walk. Margaret died in her sleep. Heart failure. Nothing dramatic. A gentle end, according to the coroner. Just gone by morning. I remember when they brought her in, her expression was serene. You'd think she'd been dreaming about something pleasant. Her hands were still warm when we placed her on the table. That detail stuck with me. We scheduled her preparation for the following afternoon. Nothing fancy, basic embalming, closed casket, per her will. But I always like to keep things orderly, so we still go through the facial setting steps. Eyes closed, mouth closed, everything aligned to look peaceful if anyone should come in to say goodbye. That night we placed her in a climate-controlled room. No tampering, no disturbances. We use a small infrared camera in the prep wing, not out of superstition, just for liability. We've had families ask about footage before when jewelry goes missing or to verify procedures. In the morning, Jude came in first. I was out handling another case. He called me 5 minutes later. I picked up on the first ring. "Boss," he said, "you need to see her face." I didn't understand what he meant until I got there. Margaret's mouth had changed. The lips, which had been gently closed, were now parted. Not slightly, wide, drawn back far beyond what looked natural. Her teeth were showing and the corners of her mouth had stretched toward her ears in a grotesque grin. Not forced like a rigor mortis twitch. No. This had purpose, like something had worked its way out from inside. We checked everything. No shifting of muscle tissue, no rupture, no pressure buildup. It wasn't from gases. There was no bloating, nothing to cause the mouth to spread like that. We had to act fast. The casket viewing was in less than 24 hours, and even though it was supposed to be closed, we couldn't risk a family member requesting a last look. I used mortuary wax around the cheeks. Jude reinforced the jaw with a needle injector. We even sutured along the gums, something we rarely have to do. By the end of it, she looked composed again, but only barely. There was tension under the makeup, like her face didn't want to stay that way. Still, we would have left it there. We would have filed it away as odd facial shift due to post-mortem movement if not for the footage. That evening, after closing, I reviewed the camera feed. It's not high definition, black and white, 12 frames per second, just enough to catch any irregularities in the rooms. Around 2:14 a.m., the camera caught her in frame. She was still, as expected. 2:16 a.m., the camera flickered slightly. It does that sometimes during power surges. 2:18. Her face moved, not all at once, not like a jump cut, slowly, frame by frame. Her lips began to curl, like someone gently pulling string through a canvas. Her cheeks lifted, her teeth appeared. It wasn't a twitch, it wasn't a muscle spasm. She smiled, and not toward the ceiling. She was smiling slightly left, toward the wall, toward the corner of the room, just outside the camera's view. She held that grin for about 3 minutes. Then stillness again. By morning, her mouth had frozen that way. I don't show the video to people. It's still on the secure drive, dated and time-stamped. I've watched it only twice since that night. Once with Jude, once alone. When we buried Margaret, her casket was shut tight, sealed with silicone, just to be sure. We keep our dead in the cold, not out of fear, out of necessity. The walk-in cooler in the back of our facility is a standard part of any funeral home. Stainless steel walls, lockable racks, Cold air humming 24 hours a day. It holds 12 bodies at once. I've spent more time than most in that room, checking toe tags, logging intakes, making sure things are in order. You grow numb to it in a way. The silence becomes routine, the stillness expected. But in this profession, there's a kind of silence you never forget. A wrong kind, the kind that feels aware. It started 2 years ago, subtle at first. A staff member mentioned hearing a voice in the cooler, murmured words, low and rhythmic. He thought it was someone praying. We checked. There was no one else there. A few weeks later, someone else heard something. Not prayers this time, but muffled crying. Thought it might be coming from the air vents. We had the unit serviced. Nothing unusual, but the sounds kept happening. Whispers, breathy phrases that stopped when you got too close. One morning, our embalmer, a man who had worked here for nearly 7 years, came to me visibly shaken. He said he'd been organizing the racks, placing a newly arrived body in slot 10. The others were still silent. Then, from the back of the cooler, he heard his own name. Clear, loud, male voice. He froze, waited, heard it again. His name, spoken once more, no echo, no joke. He checked every tag. None of the bodies had his surname, no one with any connection to him. The voice came a third time, louder now, and closer. He stepped out of the cooler and refused to go back in. That was his last day here. I wish I could say it stopped, that it was one man's overworked imagination. But over time, more people began reporting similar experiences. Voices calling out names, strange phrases in languages they didn't understand, gasps that sounded too real. And always from the back of the cooler. We had the insulation checked. We thought maybe it was the building settling or machinery interference. We even replaced the camera feed in that room, hoping to spot rodents or a failing vent system. What we caught instead was worse. The footage shows the bodies exactly as expected, still tagged in place. But every so often, around 3 a.m., you can hear something on the audio feed. A whisper, just one word. Sometimes it says a name, the exact name of someone working that week. Other times it says stay, or listen, or just hums a tuneless melody for several minutes. We keep the audio locked. It's not for the public, not for the families. Now, I don't let anyone go back there alone. I changed the policy quietly. We work in pairs, no one after midnight. Sometimes I still hear it, when I'm locking up, when the compressor kicks in and the lights hum low. A whisper, not quite a voice, not quite a thought. Thank you all for joining me on these journeys. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or gave you chills, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting stories. Have you ever experienced something similar? Or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories, and remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.